Hello everybody, my name is Henry Vendittelli and today I'm going to be talking about an extremely well-known uprising auteur, Damian Chazelle, and why he should be considered one because of the common plots, themes, characters, and finally cinematography he's used in his most well-known movies, Whiplash, La La Land, and First Man. So what really is an auteur? Well, according to Google, an auteur is a filmmaker whose personal influence and artistic control over a movie is so great that the filmmaker is credited as the author of the movie. Or in some more dumbed down terminology, or more so terminology that further supports the point that I'm making for this video, an auteur is a filmmaker who creates movies with certain artistic traits that carry on to other movies that they create, separating their movie styles from others and making them an auteur. The roots of it came from the French filmmaker François Truffaut's article published in 1954, a certain tendency in the French cinema where he basically coined the auteur term. You should give it a read, it's good stuff. Damian Chazelle has not created as many films as other well-known auteurs, but the three most well-known movies that he has produced share very common characteristics. Now, one of the reasons why I think he's an auteur is because of the way he plots his films. I call it the Chazelle cycle. Now, you may be wondering what this so-called Chazelle cycle is and what does it mean? Well, it's a sequence of events that happen to create a plot and storyline to all of his films, or for at least the films that I've viewed from him. The theory is as follows. The main character has a relatively regular life, but also has some sort of talent. There is some sort of drive or determination related with the main character. The main character gets beaten down, and the numbers may vary to the amount of times this happens. After that, the main character rises up, and the main character ends up succeeding at whatever they were trying to accomplish for a sort of feel-good and happy ending. Now, how does this cycle link with Damian and his auteur style? Well, if you've watched any of these movies before, you'll understand what I'm getting at. All three of the movies that I had watched had integrated this cycle into them in some way. And the first movie that I looked at was Whiplash. Andrew, the main character, starts off as a regular student at university and wants to become a drummer. After certain interactions with an abusive teacher and his family, he becomes determined and starts practicing. The getting beaten down and rising up happens more than once in this movie. For example, when Andrew gets into a car crash before one of his performances, the way he reacts to this is he steps out of his car injured, grabs his sticks, and runs right back to that concert to try to play his part. Another instance of this happening is when he's performing at one of the most important concerts in all of New York, and he's not even given the correct drum sheet to play. But nevertheless, he manages to overcome these obstacles and gives one of the best drum solos that people have ever heard. Thus, Whiplash completing a full rotation of the Chazelle cycle. This theorem can also be linked with La La Land. In the movie La La Land, the main character Mia, an aspiring actress who has a regular life of an actor that also works a part-time job at a coffee shop, is trying to make it big in Los Angeles. Mia becomes determined at the start of the film when a celebrity enters the coffee shop she's working at, and she decides that she wants to live the life like a celebrity. She then gets beaten down because of her boyfriend Sebastian not being there for her enough, and then she's convinced by him to rise up and do one final audition. She then gets the part, ends up succeeding, and becoming famous by the end of the film. Granted that Mia's success isn't really her happy ending, due to the popular opinion of people thinking that she dumped the wrong person. The film La La Land still goes through the Chazelle cycle. Finally, this theorem could be linked to the third film that I viewed by Damian, First Man. Now, in this movie, I guess you could say Neil Armstrong was not a regular person because, he wanted to go to the moon or whatever. But the other four rules of this theorem, or the Chazelle cycle, can still be applied to this movie. Determination really shows itself in this movie when Neil loses his daughter Karen to a brain tumor. Even though he is so emotional and upset, he ends up going back to work at NASA the next day after the funeral, even though all of his colleagues are telling him to take a day off. Neil gets beaten down because of his daughter passing away. How many other people at NASA were trying to be the first person on the moon, which created a lot of competition. And also, most importantly, how the Russian space program ended up beating the US to space. Finally, to complete this cycle, Neil rises up, takes a trip to the moon, and successfully lands. He becomes the first man on the moon and also has a little memorial for his daughter on it. Due to all of these movies by Damian Chazelle having the same plot and following the Chazelle cycle, it can be easily said that Damian Chazelle is an auteur. The way Damian portrays the message of anything is possible across each film is by making the character set an almost impossible goal at the start of the story. Then, we get to watch him get closer and closer to it as the plot evolves. This created an enjoyable and an entertaining film to watch. Some things that consistently play out in these films are ambition, determination, dedication, and finally humiliation. These themes can also be used to bring out and define similarities of the main characters of all the movies. Andrew from Whiplash, Mia from La La Land, and Neil Armstrong from First Man all have these characteristics. Firstly, they all want to succeed. Andrew trying to become the best drummer on the planet, for Mia, an actress, for Neil trying to be the first man on the moon. Next, we have determination and dedication as two themes that play together in these films. These are very prominent themes in these movies because of how all the characters really want to succeed. Neil A. is willingly spending time away from his wife and young children to go on a space expedition to the moon. And also, Andrew and Mia both break up with their partners in order for there to be no distractions in their career paths, which shows how dedicated and determined the characters are through the movies. Finally, humiliation is also a big theme that occurs in all these movies by Damian. Humiliation is a big part of all these movies because it's what gives all the characters their emotional drive. In Whiplash, Andrew getting humiliated in front of people like Fletcher only makes him want to become a better drummer. In La La Land, Mia gets humiliated when she performs her play that she slaved away on, and that nobody likes, which makes her question her career and it makes her focus on film. Finally, humiliation is a big part of First Man because of how the Russians beat the US to space, only making the US more eager to land a man on the moon. Therefore, making humiliation a big part of these three films. Now, this is probably one of the most important features that separate the filmmakers from the auteurs, and this, of course, is the way they actually show their movie through film style and cinematography. Out of the three films, the two lower budget films, Whiplash and La La Land, have had a lot of similarities when it came to cinematography. But nevertheless, there are still similarities in all three of Chazelle's films. In all movies, Damian has decided to use the technique of rack focusing and also whip panning. Rack focusing is when the camera is focused on one thing in the frame and then swaps focal lengths and focuses on another thing in the frame. Whip panning is when the camera quickly travels from one subject to another, creating kind of like a whip effect. Another technique that was used in all three of these movies was basically a bunch of related clips in sequence, or a montage. Finally, I would like to point out how a type of establishing shot was used in all three of these films that really caught my attention. This shot would look like a regular establishing shot, but Damian would always have the character set in front of the location looking off into the distance. Well, since you've made it this far into the video, now you get the special prize of watching my 1-minute movie that I created resembling Damian Chazelle's Auteur style.
Question number one. I'll write on the board if we're having it.
Now you're probably wondering, how the heck does this ill-plotted short film resemble Damian's Auteur style? Well, firstly, this little movie uses Damian's establishing shot, a couple of whip pans, a small montage of my subject getting food, and also an attempt at a rack focus that I noticed wasn't actually focused on the cup as I'm editing this. Also, it follows the Chazelle cycle. How may you ask? Well, at the start of the movie, my character is a normal person with no friends, gazing into a classroom and wishing he was cooler. Then he becomes beaten down and determined because he was not let back into the classroom. Then he rises up, plays a wicked piano solo, comes back to the classroom, loved by all of his peers, and he becomes the most popular guy in a 100-mile radius. Anyways, that about sums up my Auteur presentation. I hope you enjoyed this and maybe even learned something from it.